Hi. A few years ago, I had a remarkable conversation with one of my patients. And for our purposes here, let's just call him Joseph. I was seated at his bedside, asking him about his worries and wishes about dying. He explained to me that he didn't want any medications or treatments that would alter his experience with death. He said to me, "My dear, death is the last final mystery, the last great adventure, and it's mine to experience." I was so inspired by his response because of this profound ownership and protection of an experience so many of us fear. I wasn't working the day that Joseph died, but I'll tell you, when I heard he had that cliche image of him riding off into the sunset, that didn't appear to me. In fact, a much bolder image of Joseph came into my mind. I imagined him as a pioneer at the helm of a huge flagship, sailing off into uncharted seas. And as a mighty wind came and filled the sails and took his last breath away, there was Joseph on his last great adventure. So some of you may say, that's an overly romantic depiction of dying. In fact, a lot of you might think dying isn't very dignified. It's messy, it's full of pain and struggle. But Joseph taught me that there's space for joy, a yielding relief, and a beautiful vulnerability that happens at the end of life. I have learned some profound lessons as a palliative care nurse, and most of them have been from my patients and their families. I've had the privilege of observing people in this intimate time in their lives, and I must tell you, dying can be a very intimate experience. People coming together, grieving together, forgiving each other, and sometimes not, fighting, kissing, crying. The end of one's life can be so full of emotion. It is such an impactful part of life, not unlike birth. But from the day we are each born, the only certainty is that one day we will all be in that same space. And although the experience will be unique for each of us, death is universal. For centuries, long before the healthcare that we know, death was a very real threat at any stage of life: the young, the old, the fit, and the frail. Lifespans were much shorter, and people often died in their homes under the care of their families. Death wasn't shrouded by a hospital curtain. People saw it, they felt it. And society had a fairly good understanding of what death and dying looked like. Moving forward ahead, public health and modern medicine was developed. We learned how to ward off infections and treat conditions. Lifespans got dramatically longer, almost twofold. However, modern medicine has also changed how we age and how we view death and dying. Now, the literature tells us most people would prefer to die in their home, or at least stay home as long as possible. And although dying at home isn't for everyone, most people wanted to be around their loved ones and feel well supported. Ironically, although we're living longer, more of us will have one or two chronic conditions later in life. And more of us will spend the last days to even years of our lives in some form of healthcare facility away from the family home. Now, medicine has done tremendous work, and it's tremendously helpful, but medicine can only manage illness for so long. It can only repair and reverse so much. And the goal of medicine for so long has been to treat illness that somehow we haven't given the same consideration to the inevitable outcomes of that action. Outcomes such as lengthier aging periods, and more healthcare needs later in life. In short, we're keeping people alive longer, but we haven't adequately prepared or planned on how to support them in those valuable years we fought so hard to save. I'm going to give you an analogy that might help you understand what I mean. Medicine views your body as a biomedical machine, and it views death as failure of that machine. The ideology of medicine isn't really designed to embrace dying and death as part of the overall picture. In fact, it's in constant conflict with it. It's trying to avoid death by keeping the machine in good working order for as long as possible. And when something breaks or there's a malfunction, we want to repair and restore function. Healthcare professionals are taught this time and time again. Find the problem, react, intervene, respond. This reactive nature to health has dominated healthcare research, healthcare funding, and large society structures for decades. For example, the government spends far more money on hospitals, acute care facilities, than it does on preventative things such as health promotion. That same reactive approach that we see in healthcare, we also see in how we view death and dying. We don't plan for it far in advance. We wait until the problem is upon us, such as being diagnosed with a terminal illness. Sadly, I see this too often. Patients and families now scrambling to make sense of this new reality that somehow now, after the diagnosis, their life is shorter. We all like to think there's always more time ahead of us, but sometimes that more time becomes now. And the here and now is the time that you have left. We have to shift our approach from reactive to proactive. We have to start planning for things that are ahead of us, not later when you're older and it's somehow socially acceptable that you should then start thinking about death. I'm talking about now. And if you remember nothing else from my talk, remember this: it is healthy to explore your mortality, even when you're young. Embrace this idea that dying and death can be a part of a healthy life. Sit down, think about it, write down your wishes, write down your worries, share them with your loved ones, and I will tell you when the time comes, however it comes, you will be so grateful that you let people know what was important to you. I'm going to tell you another story that'll help explain that. And this time, it's about family, particularly a daughter saying goodbye to her dad. All you need to know about the case is this: everyone knew Dad had cancer. Everybody knew what was important to Dad. They knew how badly he wanted to donate an organ or some tissue to give something of himself to others. He died with his loved ones at the bedside. And as people started to say their goodbyes and leave the room, I noticed the daughter struggling so hard to say goodbye to her dad. But it was also becoming time for me to notify the eye bank and prepare for his eye donation. I wanted to make it better for her. I didn't know how to handle this, but I thought, I'm going to take a chance and ask her if she wants to help me. I explained what needed to be done, and she said yes. So we went, called the referral to the eye bank, gathered our supplies. The task was simple. We needed to put a few eye drops in each eye, place some ice over his eyes, and put a wrap over the face. She did such a good job. She did everything just right and with so much love, saying goodbye to her dad, one drop at a time. And when she was ready, she placed the ice on his face and, like wrapping up a present, secured it in place. It's stories like this that remind me that there is no normal way to deal with this. And I'll tell you, that's not normal protocol for a family member to do that procedure. But it was beautiful. Experiences like that make me want that kind of beauty in my life, especially at the end. I firmly believe that we need to get reacquainted with dying as a society. We need to explore new possibilities and ways of viewing mortality. There's a great quote, and unfortunately, I don't know the author's name because it's listed as unknown, but a comfort zone is a beautiful place, but nothing ever grows there. And I think that's so true. The best growth that happens is when we get uncomfortable and when we challenge what we think we know and understand about the world around us. An excellent example of this comes from Harley High School in Rochester, New York. It's basically an elective class for 1 year where high school students can actively partake in the care of hospice patients in their community. This program blows the door open on taboo subjects and allows real experiential learning for both the students and the clients. It pulls back that curtain, pulls back the shroud, and allows unobstructed experience with death and end of life for people in their own community. This is just one example of many ways that we can start to bring death and dying into our healthy lives. We have birth plans, wedding plans, retirement plans. Why would we not plan for something so important in each of our lives? We need to foster empathy, understanding. We need to foster healthy dying, to allow every day, even the last day, to be full of life. I ask each of you, the young, the old, the fit, and the frail, what gives your life meaning? What might give your death meaning? And what is healthy dying for you?